soft piano. The river remembers, the land is breathing again. I heard you in the quiet before the morning came, a whisper through the valley, calling every name. The stones were holding sorrow, the dust remembered tears, but light moved on the water, and mercy drew us near. Something is waking under the ground, something is rising without a sound. The scattered are turning, the gates are open wide. The mother is calling her children back inside.
Let's talk about the cleansing before the war, the Red Heifer Israel, and the restoration of the land. In the last teaching, we looked at the mystery of the Red Heifer, the water of purification, and the answer to death contact. But today, we are following that thread forward into the prophets. We are asking a deeper question. Why does purification appear before restoration, before the house is made ready, and before the final resistance rises against what Adonai is restoring? Ezekiel speaks to the mountains of Israel. He speaks to the scattered house. He speaks of clean water, a new heart, breath returning to dry bones, and a people being placed again upon their own land. And in the deeper mystery, returning to the land is not only returning to soil, it is returning to Zion, to the mother, to the living covenant house where the scattered children are gathered again. So today we are not reteaching Numbers 19. We are watching the thread move forward from personal cleansing to a people restored, to the land made ready, to the house being restored, to the final resistance, and finally to kingdom order. This is the cleansing before the war, the Red Heifer, Israel, and the restoration of the land. The Red Heifer shows us something ancient. When death touches the camp, Adonai provides a way for impurity to be removed. That is the Torah foundation. But the prophets show us what happens when the same purity pattern widens. The issue is no longer only one person touched by death. Now we see a scattered people, ruined places, dry bones, and a land addressed by the word of Adonai. This is why the teaching must move carefully. If we only ask, what does the Red Heifer mean? We remain at the doorway. Tonight, we are asking why this purification language appears again when Adonai begins to restore Israel, Zion, and the land. In Hebrew, the language of impurity and cleansing is very important. The word tuma speaks of uncleanness, impurity, and defilement. It is not only about emotion, it is a condition that affects access, nearness, worship, and the order of the camp. The word tahara speaks of purification, cleansing, and being made clean. It is not merely about feeling restored. It is about being made ready to approach, to dwell, to serve, and to belong again in the holy order of Adonai. Then we have the phrase mayim tehorim, pure waters, clean waters. This language appears powerfully in Ezekiel 36, where Adonai says he will sprinkle clean water upon his people and they shall be clean. This matters because Ezekiel is not simply describing personal renewal. He is speaking about a gathered people, a restored inheritance, and a return to the covenant place. The water language moves from the Torah into the prophets. So today we are going to follow 4 Hebrew ideas: tum'ah, defilement; tahara, purification; ruach, breath; spirit, wind; adamah, and eretz, ground, land, inheritance. These words will carry us from the Red Heifer foundation into Ezekiel, Zechariah, and the restoration of the house. Ezekiel 36 begins with the land. Before Ezekiel speaks of clean water upon the people, he is commanded to speak to the land. Adonai says to the prophet, "Son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel." In Hebrew, the phrase is Harei Yisrael, the mountains of Israel. The mountains, hills, streams, valleys, desolate ruins, and abandoned cities are all brought into the prophetic address. This means the restoration is not only inward. It is not only a private renewal inside the heart. The land itself is being summoned under the word of Adonai because the land carries a living mystery. She is not treated as empty soil, but as the covenant place that remembers, mourns, receives comfort, and comes under the promise of restoration. The people are gathered before they are sprinkled. Ezekiel 36 does not present cleansing as an isolated event. First, Adonai says he will take his people from among the nations Gather them from all countries and bring them into their own land. Only after this return does the clean water appear. This gives us order. The exiles are brought near. The scattered house is called back to the covenant place. Then Adonai says, I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean. This is where the red heifer thread begins to move forward. In Numbers 19, the water of purification answers death contact in the camp. In Ezekiel 36, clean water appears in the restoration of a scattered people. The foundation is Torah, but the movement is prophetic. Then Adonai says he will cleanse them from their uncleanness and from their idols. He will give them a new heart and put a new spirit within them. This is not only washing from the outside, it is the restoration of the inward life. So the people are not merely moved from one location to another. They are gathered, washed, renewed, and brought back into covenant order with Adonai. In Isaiah 61:3, we can see the mystery of ashes becoming glory. In the red heifer mystery, the ashes are not the end. They become part of the cleansing appointed by Adonai. Isaiah 61:3 carries this same witness. He gives a garland for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and the mantle of praise for the spirit of heaviness. What was once connected to death becomes a sign of restoration. What was mourning in Zion becomes joy. What was heaviness becomes praise. And those who are cleansed and restored are called trees of righteousness, the planting of Adonai, that he may be glorified. This is why the ashes speak prophetically, not only of death, but of purification, restoration, and the glory that comes after mourning. Now we can understand the return to the land more deeply. Returning to the land has a deeper mystery. Now, when Ezekiel speaks of the land, we must listen with prophetic ears. The prophets do not treat the land as empty ground or lifeless soil. She mourns. She carries defilement. She receives comfort. She is remembered, restored, and made fruitful again. This shows us that the land carries a living mystery. In the deeper prophetic layer, she represents the mother, Zion, the covenant place where the scattered children must return. To return to the land is to return to the mother. It is to come back to the living place of cleansing, identity, covering, and restoration. The people are not merely coming back to territory. They are coming back to the one who carries the house, the exile, the sorrow, and the promise of return. This is why the prophets speak of Zion and Jerusalem with living language. She is daughter, mother, widow, temple, comforted one, restored one, and the one who receives her children again. The land is not separated from this mystery. She is the living covenant place where exile is answered. So when the people return, we can see the deeper layer. They are coming back to the mother, to Zion, to the living house. They are returning to the place where sin is washed, shame is removed, and the scattered are gathered back into belonging. The land is the mother. Zion is the covenant heart. The daughter is the living witness of the restored house. This gives the teaching its bridge. The people are not simply returning to a place. They are returning to identity, covering, cleansing, inheritance, and the house made whole. Ezekiel 37, breath, resurrection, and placement. After Ezekiel 36 gives us clean water and a new heart, Ezekiel 37 gives us the valley of dry bones. The prophet sees very dry bones. This is not only weakness, this is the image of death, scattering, hopelessness, and a people who say, our bones are dried, our hope is lost, we are cut off. Then Adonai commands the prophet to speak. The bones come together, sinews and flesh appear, but the bodies are still without breath. Then comes Ruach. The Hebrew word Ruach can mean breath, wind, or spirit. In Ezekiel 37, this word carries the movement from death into life. Breath enters them, and they stand upon their feet as a great army. But the vision does not end with bodies standing. Adonai says he will put his spirit within them, they shall live, and he will place them upon their own land. That final movement matters. Resurrection and restoration are joined. Breath returns and belonging returns. Life is restored and placement is restored. So Ezekiel 37 is not only about bones coming alive, it is about a people being brought back into covenant standing, covenant breath, and covenant place. It is the movement from death to breath, from mourning to joy, and from exile to belonging. We can see why the Red Heifer Foundation matters. The Red Heifer answers the impurity that comes from contact with death. Ezekiel 37 shows an entire house described under the image of death, dry bones, lost hope, and separation. The connection is not that Ezekiel is simply repeating Numbers 19. The connection is that the prophetic story has widened. What death contact was to the person, exile and spiritual desolation became to the people. This is why the clean water of Ezekiel 36 and the breath of Ezekiel 37 belong together. One removes defilement, the other restores life. One washes, the other raises. One prepares the vessel, the other fills it with breath. The people are forgiven, revived, returned, and placed in the inheritance that carries the mystery of Zion. This is the prophetic widening of the purification thread. This means the purification mystery has moved from the camp into the whole prophetic story. What began as cleansing from death contact now becomes a pattern for understanding exile, defilement, restoration, breath, and return. The person touched by death needed cleansing before re-entering the order of the camp. In the prophets, the scattered house must also be cleansed, revived, and restored before the fullness of inheritance can be established. So we are not leaving the Red Heifer foundation behind. We are watching it widen. The Torah gives us the principle. Ezekiel shows us the prophetic scale. The same Adonai who cleanses the person also restores the house, remembers the land, and prepares the inheritance. Zechariah gives another witness to the cleansing thread. The prophet says, "In that day there shall be a fountain opened to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem." In Hebrew, the phrase is makor niftash, a fountain opened. This fountain is opened for sin and for impurity. That matters because Zechariah is not only speaking of forgiveness in a general way, he is using language that touches uncleanness, washing, and restoration. Notice where the fountain opens, to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. This is not disconnected from covenant, city, throne, or people. The cleansing is tied to the house and to Jerusalem. So Zechariah becomes another bridge in the study. Ezekiel shows clean water upon the gathered people. Ezekiel 37 shows breath returning to the dry bones. Zechariah shows an opened fountain for Jerusalem. The same thread is moving, but now it is royal, city-centered, and connected to the house of David. The purification mystery is widening. It begins with the person touched by death, but it moves toward a house, a city, a people, and a restored inheritance. The Aramaic witness, an ancient echo beloved. When we look at the Aramaic witness of the prophets, especially Targum Jonathan, we must use it carefully. We are not saying that rabbinic tradition teaches the full interpretation we are walking through. That would not be honest, and we do not need to force the rabbis to say what they did not say. But the Aramaic witness helps us hear how the prophetic text was carried in ancient Jewish transmission. It keeps before us the same movements we are already seeing in Hebrew: gathering, cleansing, breath, land, restoration, and the vindication of Adonai's name. So the Aramaic witness serves as an ancient echo. It is not proof for every layer of the mystery, but it does show that we are staying close to the prophetic language. We are not replacing the Hebrew meaning. We are honoring it. We are watching the words unfold: tuma, uncleanness, impurity and defilement, tahara, purity, cleansing and purification, ruach, breath, wind and spirit, eretz, land, earth, ground, country, and territory. We are also watching the larger prophetic movement: Zion, Jerusalem, house, land, cleansing, and return. The deeper mystery must never erase the plain text. It must rise from it. This is very important because the mystery must remain anchored. We do not begin with imagination and then force it onto the text. We begin with what the prophets actually say. They speak of land, water, breath, cleansing, return, Zion, Jerusalem, house, inheritance, and the sanctification of Adonai's name. The deeper layer is carried by these words. It rises from the plain meaning instead of replacing it. So when we speak of the land as mother, the daughter as witness, and the house being restored, we are not trying to erase Ezekiel. We are listening to Ezekiel more deeply because the prophets themselves speak with living language, why the land must be cleansed. Now the thread moves from the person and the people into the living mystery of the land. In the Torah and the prophets, the land can be defiled by bloodshed, idolatry, injustice, exile, and covenant breaking. She is not treated as empty space. She carries witness. She can mourn. She can be left desolate. She can also be comforted and restored. This is why restoration cannot be shallow. Adonai is not only gathering the people while ignoring what the mother has carried. He is putting the house back in order. If the land was defiled, she must be purified. If Zion mourned, she must be comforted. If the daughter carried exile, she must be restored. This prepares us to understand why the conflict rises in a prophetic context. The war is not random. It comes when restoration is already in motion. The enemy does not resist emptiness. He resists the house being restored. Ezekiel 38 and 39, the land cleansed. After Gog, Ezekiel 38 and 39 bring us into the Gog of Magog conflict. But we are focusing on one detail that belongs to this study. After the conflict, Ezekiel 39 says the house of Israel will bury the dead for 7 months in order to cleanse the land. That verse is the bridge. The war leaves death in the land. The aftermath must be addressed. The inheritance cannot simply move forward while death remains uncovered. The land must be made clean. So even in the Gog of Magog passage, the cleansing thread is present. The conflict does not end only with victory. It moves into purification. The land is cleared. The defilement of death is removed. The place of inheritance is prepared for the next stage of restoration. This shows us that the Red Heifer foundation and the Gog-Magog passage are not disconnected subjects. One gives the purity principle, the other shows the prophetic scale. The person must be cleansed from death contact, the people must be washed and renewed, the land must be cleared of defilement, the house must be made ready for restoration. The war is not the center of the story. The restoration of Adonai's order is the center. If we make the war the center, the teaching becomes fear-based. But if we understand the war as resistance against restoration, then we can see the bigger picture. Gog of Magog does not appear against a forgotten people with no destiny. It comes against a people being gathered, a land being remembered, and a covenant order being restored. The assault is serious, but it is not sovereign. Adonai is sovereign. The final resistance exposes the rage of the enemy, but it also reveals the faithfulness of the Holy One. What was scattered is being gathered. What was dry is receiving breath. What was defiled is being purified. What was desolate is being remembered. So we do not teach the conflict to create panic. We teach the cleansing before the conflict so the people understand preparation, holiness, and restoration. The final opposition is not the end of the story. It is the last resistance before the house is made whole. Now we come to the deeper mystery of the daughter. Throughout the prophets, Zion and Jerusalem are not spoken of as lifeless locations only. They are addressed as daughter, mother, widow, beloved, forsaken one, comforted one, and restored one. This language matters. It shows that the land and city carry a living prophetic identity. Zion mourns. Jerusalem is comforted. The desolate one receives children, the daughter is clothed again, the land is the mother, the covenant place that carries the children, the exile, the sorrow, and the promise of return. The daughter is the living witness of the restored house. We must understand that she does not replace the mother, just as the son does not replace the father. She manifests the restoration of the house and carries the testimony of return. She does not stand apart from the house. She bears witness that the house is being restored. She carries the testimony that exile is not the final word, that the scattered can return, and that what Adonai planted will not remain desolate. This is why the daughter must be recognized in her appointed witness, just as the son must be recognized in his appointed place. This is not competition, and it is not replacement. It is the order of Adonai's house. The son does not replace the father. The daughter does not replace the mother. Each one must be honored according to the place Adonai has given, because the restoration belongs to his will, his wisdom, and his design. So when the daughter is restored, the mother is not removed, the house is being made whole. The covenant place, the children, the witness, and the promise of return are being brought back into divine order. So when Ezekiel says the people are returned to their land, we are not hearing geography only. We are hearing the call back to the mother, back to Zion, back to the living covenant house. This is why returning to the land can be understood as returning to her, not because the soil is the final meaning, but because the prophetic identity of Zion is alive within the land. From the living land to the house, from the house to the kingdom, the land is not empty territory. She is the mother, the living covenant place. The mother carries the house carries the children carry the promise of return. This is why purification matters. The kingdom is not built on uncleanness, death, idolatry, and bloodshed. Before fullness comes, the house must be put back in order. Ezekiel moves us from defiled land to clean water, from scattered people to gathered house, from dry bones to living army, from exile to placement, from shame to the sanctification of Adonai's name. Zechariah adds the fountain. Ezekiel 39 adds the cleansing of the land after Gog. Together the prophets show us that restoration is not random. It has order, it has holiness, it has preparation. The house must be made ready because the king is not coming to establish confusion, he is coming to reign. Why this teaching comes before the deeper conflict. This is why this teaching belongs before any deeper discussion of prophetic conflict. If people hear about Gog of Magog without first understanding restoration, they may only hear war. If they hear Revelation 12 without first understanding Zion, they may only see the dragon. If they hear about judgment without understanding preparation, they may miss the holiness of Adonai's order. This teaching prepares the heart to understand the larger prophetic picture. The question is not only what conflict is rising, the deeper question is, what is Adonai restoring that the enemy is trying to resist? That is why the purification thread matters. It shows us that heaven is not reacting in confusion. Adonai is preparing a people, a house, a living inheritance, and a kingdom order. The woman, the dragon, and the war language belong to the larger pattern of conflict around birth, inheritance, authority, and restoration. The dragon does not rage without reason. He rages because heaven's order is moving forward. He rages because the appointed child, the seed, the witness, and the house are connected to the final undoing of his claim. So when we come from Ezekiel into the larger prophetic picture, we should not separate cleansing from conflict. The house is being restored, and the adversary resists restoration, but in this teaching, we stay with the purification thread. We do not jump too far ahead. We allow Ezekiel and Zechariah to prepare the foundation for understanding why the final conflict rises against what Adonai is making ready. We can see that the cleansing thread moves in layers. Let us gather the layers without returning to the foundation. First, the Torah shows purification from death contact, that is the personal level. Second, Ezekiel 36 shows clean water upon a gathered people, that is the national and covenant level. Third, Isaiah 61:3 shows ashes becoming beauty, mourning becoming joy, and the restored ones being called trees of righteousness, the planting of Adonai, that is the ashes to glory level. Fourth, Ezekiel 37 shows dry bones receiving breath and being placed upon their land, that is the resurrection and restoration level. Fifth, Zechariah 13 shows a fountain opened for the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, that is the royal and city level. Sixth, Ezekiel 39 shows the land cleansed after Gog, that is the living land and prophetic war level. And within the deeper mystery, the return to the land also carries the return to the mother, to Zion, to the living covenant house, where the scattered children are gathered again. This is the full movement, from death contact to clean water, to ashes becoming glory, to breath returning, to covenant return, to the land cleansed, to the house restored, and to kingdom order. The house of Adonai is not restored by noise. It is restored by holiness, order, breath, and covenant faithfulness. This is why prophetic restoration cannot be reduced to politics, geography, or war reports. The prophets speak deeper than headlines. They show us a people being inwardly renewed, not merely outwardly relocated. The scattered must remember who they are. The dry bones must hear the word of Adonai. The son must be recognized, and the daughter must also be recognized in her appointed witness. This is not competition, and it is not replacement. It is the order of Adonai's plan. Each one must be honored according to the place Adonai has given, because the restoration of the house belongs to his will, his wisdom, and his design. We may not understand the fullness of the mystery, but we must reverence what Adonai has chosen to reveal. His plan must be respected, received, and handled with humility. So this preparation is not a small detail. It is the sign that Adonai is putting his house back in order. The kingdom shows the final answer. Now we can understand the conflict more clearly. The opposition does not rise against emptiness. It rises against restoration in motion. It comes when the people are being gathered, the living land is being remembered, and the house is being prepared. But the resistance does not have the final word. The prophets do not end with Gog and Magog. They do not end with graves. They do not end with desolation. They move toward the sanctification of Adonai's name and the restoration of his order. So when we speak of the war, we do not glorify the war. We magnify the one who reigns beyond it. The goal is not merely survival. The goal is kingdom restoration. Adonai is not only removing what defiles, he is establishing what belongs to him. He is setting the house in order so the king may reign over a restored inheritance. This is why the final conflict cannot be the final message. The conflict reveals what opposes Adonai, but the kingdom reveals his purpose. The war shows the last resistance. The kingdom shows the final answer. And we close this teaching with this. We move from Torah into the prophets, from the purity of the camp into the restoration of the house, from death contact into breath, return, and kingdom order. This is the movement of Adonai. He gathers, he washes, he breathes, he places, he restores, he reigns. So when we hear of war, we must look deeper than war. We must ask what heaven is restoring that darkness is trying to resist. The graves are not stronger than the breath. The defilement is not stronger than the fountain. The ashes are not stronger than the glory Adonai has appointed. The exile is not stronger than the return, and the war is not stronger than the king. Beloved, this is why the cleansing comes before the war, not because conflict has the final word, but because Adonai is preparing what belongs to him. The inheritance will not remain desolate, the house will not remain broken, the daughter will not remain unseen, and the kingdom of Adonai will stand. Thank you, family, for being here. If this teaching helped you, please like, comment, and share. It truly helps this message reach those who are seeking. To our new subscribers, welcome. And if you'd like to go deeper, we invite you to join as a member. The link is in the description and on our homepage. We are praying for you and standing with you in the light of Messiah He and Messiah She. If you'd like to support the ministry, you can visit our store or bless our dear brother Michael via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below, which also includes a link to our second store with new designs. Thank you for your love and encouragement, and stay tuned for the next video. May the spirit of wisdom and peace rest upon you always.